Oswald the Reeve was a man of thin frame and even thinner patience. He sat among the pilgrims, his eyes narrowed like a hawk's, fixed directly on the back of the miller's thick neck. The miller had told a tale that mocked carpenters, and Oswald, a carpenter by trade, would not let the insult stand. He cleared his throat, the sound like dry leaves skittering on stone, and began a story of his own, a story of a thief, a mill, and a vengeance that tasted better than the finest flour. In the village of Trumpington lived a miller named Simpkin. He was a man of great bulk and even greater ego, a bully who swaggered with a dagger at his belt and a crooked scale in his hand. Simpkin believed himself a king among peasants because he knew how to steal a portion of every man's grain. He would whistle a tune while he diverted flour into his own sacks, laughing at the foolishness of those who trusted him to grind their wheat fairly. Two young scholars from Cambridge, John and Ellen, decided they would be the ones to catch the thief. They were clever boys, or so they thought, and they arrived at the mill with a heavy sack of grain and eyes like flint. "We shall watch the grain go in the hopper," Aline declared, "and we shall watch the flour come out the spout." They stood side by side, defiant and watchful, determined that not a single grain would go missing under their vigil. Simpkin saw their suspicion and felt a cold spark of spite. If these boys wanted to play a game of wits, he would show them who owned the board. While the students were distracted by the spinning stones, Simpkin slipped out the back door. With a silent, wicked grin, he untied the bridle of their horse, Bayard, and gave the beast a sharp slap. The horse bolted into the wild fens, neighing in a frantic rush for freedom. When the students realized their horse was gone, panic replaced their pride. "The horse, our only way home," John cried. They abandoned the grain and the mill, sprinting into the darkening marshlands. For hours they splashed through cold muck and tangled reeds, chasing the ghost of a horse that stayed just out of reach. Simpkin watched them from his window, leaning back and pouring himself a drink, knowing exactly how much of their flour he was currently stealing. By the time the students returned, dragging the horse behind them, the sun had set and the mill was dark. They were cold, wet, and thoroughly beaten. Simpkin mocked them with a false show of hospitality, offering them a cramped room in the mill for the night. "A scholar's wit is no match for a cold night," Simpkin sneered, leading John to a small bed wedged into the corner of the crowded living space. The room was tight, shared by Simpkin, his wife Petronila, and their daughter Idonia. The night air was thick with the miller's rhythmic snoring. Alin, fueled by a burning need for restitution, crept from his bed. He found Idonia in the darkness, and in the spirit of the gritty fabliau, he sought his vengeance through a secret midnight tryst. The girl, weary of her father's tyranny, found the scholar's attention a welcome change from the silence of the mill. John, left alone and feeling slighted, decided on a trick of his own. He quietly moved the cradle of Simpkin's infant child from the foot of the miller's bed to the foot of his own. When Petronilla rose in the dark to tend to a need, she felt for the cradle to find her way back. Finding it at the foot of John's bed, she climbed under the covers, believing herself to be back with her husband. John smiled in the dark, the score slowly evening. As the first gray light of dawn touched the mill, Aline prepared to slip back to his bed. Overwhelmed by his victory, he stumbled toward the shadow he thought was John. "Listen, brother," Ellen whispered, grabbing the man's shoulder. "I have had a night of such sport with the miller's daughter that you would not believe." But the shoulder he held was thick and hairy. It was Simpkin, who woke with a roar of absolute fury. The room erupted into a chaotic brawl. In the dim light and the dust of the mill, Petronilla woke and saw two figures struggling. She saw a glimmer of white, a bald head she thought was one of the scholars. She grabbed a heavy staff and swung with all her might to defend her husband. But the white glimmer was the moonlight reflecting off Simpkin's own bald pate. The blow landed with a sickening thud, sending the miller crashing into the flour bins as the scholars made their escape, grain and pride finally reclaimed.